Thank you for saying good morning, Dave. And here we are. Again, we took a break last week from the study, so we're going to pick up. We are looking at chapter 4 of John's Gospel, and we're exploring this interchange with Jesus and the woman at the well. Really a familiar portion of John's Gospel, but we're diving in and looking at maybe some things. Hopefully we're going to gain some things we hadn't seen before. So because we missed last week, I thought, what I thought we'd do is review this exchange as we go through. So I'm looking back at the beginning of the conversation in verse 5. Jesus engages this conversation with this woman. And first of all, he moves towards Jesus moves towards a known and deeply painful social risk by asking the woman for a drink of water. And to me, what Jesus' actions portray here, demonstrate, is a much deeper truth and wisdom than just asking for a drink of water. You know, it's in a sense, what we're experiencing here this morning with Everett and Dick and their families and what's going on is, I think what life teaches us and wisdom teaches us is that everything within us abhors the idea of sickness and death. Everything, and you know, we're so self-conscious, and there is this abhorrence within us that's naturally. But what your words were this morning were so wise to all of us is that in some ways it's a hard time, but yet it's a very holy time as well. And as you and I learn to move towards grief, move towards sorrow, there is an amazing things that occur, and you were expressing some of those things this morning. So this is what Jesus is demonstrating to us, is moving towards a very painful, in this case, social rift, but the application is very, very broad. So he's asking for a drink of water. The woman responds in cautious surprise by asking, why? Why are you doing this? And because in her mind, she's operating out of the same operating system as the rest of us. Why would you do this? Why would you move towards me? Because that's not what we do. And so she asks this question. Jesus responds and says, draws the woman even closer by making the offer of living water. And now taking it now to a whole nother level, an extended offering. Then again, we're still in 5 through 14 review. The woman responds in confusion, and we've tied it back to Nicodemus' response. Jesus is talking at a different level here about a deeper, more powerful, and more comprehensive reality. And what is true of Nicodemus is being very astute, very, very well trained, very religious, is now also true with the woman at the well. That we're all operating under the same level. We're trying to understand as a human race the realities of what is that God has created. Living water, born again. Her mind then immediately attempts to profile Jesus into and to place him into her self-constructed, it could be hierarchy of importance, or I'm using a diagram of a ladder. Again, something we all do. He is revealing things to her that are blowing her mind. And now she's seeing, sensing more. This man is someone different. And she's, like we normally do, we try to place people and conversations in levels of importance. How much should I pay attention? And while I was sitting here this morning, I had to chuckle. A couple of years, 2 to 3 years ago, I had a sales appointment with a person up in Wyoming, across the border in a remote area between Fort Collins and in Wyoming. But you know, nowadays you go back on these jeep roads in these areas, you think you're away from you are from civilization, and you round a corner and there's a huge, beautiful log home. You know, someone has built back in there. And this was true. I went and visited these people, and his name is Mr. and Mrs. Jim Grant. So as we were sitting we scoped his property and where the generator, it was all a generator. He wanted backup power. He didn't want his house to freeze up. It was a vacation home for them. And you know, as I sat with him at the table, Jim Grant, he talked about his place in, I knew he lived in he's got a flat in Manhattan. So he does his work in Manhattan. He's got this beautiful, massive log home out in Wyoming. And I was sitting there, and something he said, I said, you know, Jim, excuse me, but I get the feeling that you are famous and I don't know it, and I'm sorry. And he really had a chuckle about that. And it turns out his pen name is Lee Child, and he's the founder of he's Jack Reacher. Yeah. So his real name is Jim Grant, but I met Lee Child, and of course, as I was leaving the property, his wife was out walking their dog, and I said, yeah, I had a nice conversation with Jim, and I didn't know who he was. He kind of explained it to me. Actually, he didn't. And he said he's an author of Lee Child, and I didn't know who Lee Child was. And so I leaving the property in my Jeep, and I rolled down the window, saying, "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Grant." And I had quite a conversation with your husband, and I didn't know he was famous, and he told me he was Lee Child, and I said, well, I get the feeling you're famous and I don't know it. And she just broke out and laughed. She goes, he gets that. He gets, wherever he goes, people are hanging all over him. And I go, well, what has he written? And I knew his fiction. And he goes, well, he's famous for Jack. He's the founder of Jack Reacher. And of course, I knew about Jack Reacher because of the films. So then it all came together. But during the conversation, the point is we all, now I know, Jim. I need to listen to Jim. He's important. And although he was very humble, nice, very nice man, and but the point is when you and I meet someone new, we're always trying to profile them and place them into a ladder of importance, and that's just what we do, and that's what the woman was doing with Jesus here in John chapter 4. Jesus then states the value of his offering. He kind of moves right off of that in verses 13 and 14 by providing a simple comparison of the two types of water. You keep coming back to this well for physical water, but the water I have for you far transcends what this is all about. Amazing response to this woman. Well, obviously, now we move into what we talked about last time, 15 through 20, she wants the water. And then Jesus responds and says, go call your husband. And, we're trying to look at this maybe a little bit different. And I think the core of what this is all about is not about nailing her, quote, sin, but it's about engaging this woman to an entirely different, deeper and personal level, opening the door for vulnerable exchange, guys. And vulnerable exchange is really at the core of sincere and authentic human communication. When we can get real, when we can let down our defenses to make ourselves truly vulnerable, is when really great things can happen. And that's what this exchange, I believe, is what this is designed to do. And so she then verbally, again, for the second time, profiles Jesus as now prophet. In the other one, it's, are you greater than Moses? Or is it Jacob? Yeah, yes, our father Jacob. Here it's, I perceive you're a prophet. She just got her mail read here. Quickly, and then, she makes that statement, but then she redirects the conversation by handing Jesus the hot potato of Jewish-Samaritan tension, which is all about who's got the right place here, the right soil, who is doing it right. Now this is our point of correlation in our context, doing it right. We put a lot of value on being right, doing right, saying right, looking right, believing the right things, being right. This is all about being right. So now we read, this takes us right to the text. So would somebody read verses 21 through 23? This is new.
Woman, believe me, an hour is coming when neither in this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But an hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For such people the Father seeks to be his worshipers.
Boy, thank you, David. And boy, there's a lot going on in here. So we're going to just incrementally kind of work through it, and then we're basically just going to introduce this section this morning, and then next week we'll really dive into this because there's a lot going on here. So I think what I'll do then is, through his use of the phrase, the hour is coming. He uses that 2 times. He's projecting ahead. He directs the attention away from being right. He's redirecting the focus of the conversation to a much larger reality which encompasses Jew and Samaritan. He's bringing this together. There is a coming together. Okay, so through his inclusive language, Jesus levels the playing field. But yet he also, on the other hand, acknowledges the difference between Jew and Samaritan. He's pointing out the unique role the Jew has played throughout history to what I call service mankind. He uses Torah truth, which was authoritative in the Samaritan frame of reference. They believed in the Torah, and they believed based on the Torah, they were the ones that were right, and that Mount Gerizim was the place of worship. We've already looked at that. So he's using an authoritative source, quoting script, quoting, not indirectly referring to Torah, to support his point, and that's verses 21 through 23. So this is kind of an overview. There's a tension going on here, and that tension is he's bringing Jew and Samaritan together under the term father, which he introduces, but yet he acknowledges the difference between Jew and Samaritan. This is a tightrope. He's walking that. So, digging now, let's take a close look, underline verse 21, and I think we'll kind of wrap this. This is where we'll end before we tie it together. But what's going on? What's underlying verse 21 is what we're looking at. And of course is my perception. But this Jew-Samaritan tension, I'm visualizing it as a triangle pointing to proper place of worship. The Samaritans believed they were doing what was right, based on Torah. The Jews believed what their piece of soil was right, the right place, based on the history of the conquering of Jebus through David, the setting up of the temple, Mount Moriah, the place traditionally where Abraham offered Isaac. They believed they had it right. And they both believed they were right, and they had, their commonality was they both believed they were right. But if you're right, everybody else is wrong. Therein is the tension. So, Jew-Samaritan tension, proper place of worship, the need to be right. And they both had biblical precedent. Okay, so, yes, sir.
There's one perspective that would say the second and third words in the verse are maybe the most important of all. His first word was woman. Second words is believe me. If we don't believe him, then everything else is for naught.
Yeah. And then go a little bit more with that. And then the first word is woman. What is your intent? What are you trying to?
Well, it was
the social
non-threatening. It was he didn't. And we discussed this before. I think sometimes we look at this woman, and a lot of us roll with the fact, well, she had to be a prostitute with all these husbands, and we don't know that.
Yeah.
He didn't make that inquisition. He did a very polite, common address to get her attention. I keep thinking of, like you talked about, she's getting blown away, and I try to place myself sitting by a well, talking to God incarnate. This woman sensed, she knew that something was different here.
Yeah.
So he looks at her and says, woman, believe me.
Oh, okay, now I'm getting it. I'm getting what you're saying now.
And I put that inflection on his voice, but I think that's what it was. It was an authoritative plea that she believed what he was going to say. And if we've got to believe, guys.
Yeah.
We've got to believe.
Yeah, we're gonna go deeper in this. What you said is really set a really good stage for what we're gonna talk about. So I like that voice inflection. So this is the backdrop, this is the underpinning of what's going on in this exchange, this need culturally and socially and religiously to be right, and both basing their rightness on their on the Bible. Now, what's underlying this need to be right, now we're expanding it out, is it's fueled by the desire to please God. We all want to please God. There's no evil intent here. We want to do what we think God wants. And that is I think that is where most of humanity is. We don't want to piss God off. We want to, because we're as a species, a humanity, we're in the image of God, and I think all of us resonate and want to please God. So in order to please God, we bring definition to that, and that definition then is rightness. So then, what flows out of that is, if we use the basis of rightness as what pleases God, then it will tend towards separation. Because if Steve is right, and I believe something a little bit differently, then I'm not right. And if that is our basis, what do we do with that? We have to separate. We have to live in different parts and do things differently, and we don't talk to each other. Thus, we are in the jungle. The jungle, characterized by separation, first seen in Genesis chapter 3, where the man and the woman realized they were different and they covered themselves. And that has been going on ever since. This difference, this separation. And I think that is where, let's see, let me just go one more here. So where we're going to go with this next time, I gave you the underlying. We'll review that next time. But now this look at the text in verses 21. We're going to now go through incrementally 21 through 23. And we're going to look at how Jesus refocuses the vision to bring this all together under the term true worshipers. And we'll look at that next time. So, we'll see you next week.